Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. From South Central Los Angeles, I'm Adam Huss. Thanks for listening. This episode highlights one of the new winemaking teams that are part of the Southern California Wine Rennaissance. Herrmann York is the brand new winery that is a partnership of three young gentlemen, Dustin Herrmann, Garrett York, and Taylor York. They all originate and make wine from a part of California that is often both overlooked and unfairly maligned as a wine growing region. That is southern, specifically inland California, the high desert. They are using their intelligence, passion, and loyalty to their corner of the world to prove that delicate, interesting, and delicious wines can be made in the desert. Hearing them talk about how they are doing this is a colorful journey through this climate and its extremes, the grapes that thrive there and the creativity that they are using to craft wines that actually have not been made before. If you're having a case of holiday hangover or winter blues, this dose of Southern California sunshine brought to you by Herrmann York may be just the cure that you need. Enjoy. So I want to welcome you guys. Thanks so much for doing this. This is the Herrmann York team. And because there's three of you, would you mind introducing yourselves, please?
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having us. I'm Dustin of Herrmann York, Dustin Herrmann.
I'm Garrett York of Herrmann York.
And I'm Taylor York of Herrmann York.
So how are you guys related? Is it cousins?
So Taylor and I are brothers, and Dusty is he's an honorary York, but we couldn't just be York Winery because we'd probably get sued by the 1,000 York adjacent wineries out there. So we're Herrmann York.
Nice. So it was sort of strategic,
yeah,
using both names. That is good.
And we didn't have to actually file for a fictitious business name.
True. Well, so where are you guys right now? I mean, big macro. You don't have to be micro.
We are in, I guess, what you could call our very first winery facility, Garrett's Garage in Redlands, California.
So for people who may not know where Redlands is, and I'm not even 100%, where are you? Where is Redlands?
So I always get angry when people compare where they live in California to where they are to Los Angeles. But here we go. We are in between Los Angeles and Palm Springs.
Like halfway?
About. Let's go with
okay.
Halfway, yeah.
Yeah. If you're driving to Palm Springs from LA and you see a bunch of trees, then you're in Redlands. Anywhere else in the space between, you're likely not looking at a lot of trees. But here,
I haven't made that drive enough, but I can't even think of any trees until you get up. All right, so are there mountains?
Hills.
You're in the foothills?
Yeah, we're close to the foothills.
For the geographically inclined, we're at the far east end of the San Bernardino Valley. So
we are zoned 9B.
At the base of the San Bernardino Mountains.
Yeah. We have views of San Gregonio, San Bernardino Pink, the San Gabriel Mountain Range, and from the right angle, you can see San Jacinto, too.
I love that. Well, in honor of you guys, I came about as far as I ever come and was in Ontario and Chino today and checking out actually a vineyard and buying chickens, believe it or not. And I bought some wine from out there because I was like, well, this is in honor of you guys. It's not your wine, but that's not available yet. So I got as close as I could.
It's from an old AVA, Rancho Cucamonga.
Yeah, what in Ontario did you go to?
Galliano.
Nice.
OG.
Yeah. That is old stuff.
Pre-prohibition, I walked through the vines that are, could be my great-great-grandparents, basically, in terms of, I guess, how long they've been around.
They're really short.
They're really short. I mean, because they don't do anything, as far as I understand. That's it. They were stuck in sand, 80 years ago or something like that, and that's all that happened to them. They're still there. The ones that survived. It's pretty incredible.
I imagine their tap roots go like 100 feet into the ground. Like they
must
follow the core of the earth.
Must be, yeah. But they, I mean, anyway, enough about them. You guys are born and bred in that neck of the woods, right?
A
More or
bit,
less.
yeah. Taylor and I are from the Mojave Desert, so we grew up in Victorville, which, you know, I also dislike comparing cities in California to a Los Angeles. But if you're driving from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, right in the middle is where Taylor and I are from.
Right.
Yeah,
I've actually
I was born and raised one town over, so I haven't gotten too far.
So it must be paradisical there if you guys, haven't left, right? I mean, it's got everything you need, no reason to leave.
Yeah, we've all left for a year or two or three and found our way back by choice for the most part.
Okay. So what got you into wine? I mean, is it, I don't know, like, what's the story there?
I think in our journey of having adult beverages, we found ourselves in wine and found ourselves talking more and more about it. And we kind of landed on that more than anything else. Taylor's a beer guy, so maybe this is just Garrett and I.
But he doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
He doesn't make beer anymore.
Yeah, we just
That's not true.
We kept talking about it more and more and more, and then it was always the dream, like, hey, let's have a wine bar, let's start a winery. And then we started reading more about everything, and then we realized that we could probably make something happen, and we became passionate with making wine in the garage, and then that just became real.
Yeah, and I'm obnoxiously. I mean, you and I talk quite a bit, but I'm obnoxiously intellectual about wine. So my introduction to it has been through books. So uh, when my wife and I got married, we kind of combined our books on the shelf in our apartment. And she was born in Napa, and she had tons of wine books, like your typical like tasting guides of St. Helena or Calistoga or the Sonoma Coast. But then she also had like Secrets of the Sommelier, the Jordan Mackey and Raj Parr book that like blew my mind. I had no idea that people cared as much about a fermented beverage as those guys did. And then I realized that a lot of other people care that much about wine. And that just led to more books and then to better and better wine.
Well, and you and I have that in common too. I mean, it was reading that, you start reading about it, and the more you learn about it, the more you want to drink it.
Yeah.
But why were you reading about it? I mean, like, what inspired that? Was it just your natural curiosity, and the books were laying around, and why
I
not?
ran through all the books on the bookshelf.
There you go.
And I was like, I came to that section of the library and I was like, oh, well, this has got to be something. And, when we got married, if you'll humor a short story, my wife has a 59 Studebaker. She was born in Napa, and it was my plan to try and surprise her. And I thought the only way that I could surprise her with a proposal is if I had everyone else with us drive that moment. And I had no kind of control over it. So I said to Taylor, I said, hey, if I just kind of told you the plan, would you kind of drive our entire proposal? And he's like, yeah, of course. So we got in my wife's 59 Studebaker, and Taylor was like, hey, why don't we drive up valley to Calistoga and just take some pictures with your car? So we go up the valley, and he's like, hey, why don't we stop off in this vineyard?
A little aside, these so Kendall and Garrett, the way that their fashion in those days was very vintage, and so we're sitting in the back of this 59 Studebaker driving up valley on this windy road and looking ahead at Garrett and Kendall sitting there, and it was like a picture out of from like 1959.
Yeah. So Taylor's got his camera, and we pull off into somebody's vineyard. I don't even know who it belonged to, but I was getting nervous that someone was going to come out with a shotgun or a dog or something. They didn't. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give you a signal, and then when I do, I'll take a picture right at the moment. So she thankfully said okay, and we've been married 6 years now. But like, it's hard to not have those experiences in a place like Calistoga, which is picturesque, and not think like, oh, there's something to this kind of agriculture. There's something to how much money and time and passion goes into a beverage like this. It isn't just some commodity sitting on the shelf next to Hostess donuts.
Yeah, that's what I like that little analogy that in Dusty's biography on your website about working on cars that are solely meant for pleasure driving and how that translates to wine. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, wine for us, it definitely is pleasure. When we talk about it, it's pleasure. And when we work with it and when we go pick and harvest, it truly is a pleasure thing. And I think it's always been my goal. That's why I've been working on cars, because I always thought I should get a real job. And then I realized I really enjoyed working on cars. So it's always my goal to make work and pleasure kind of the same thing. So with wine, we just kept talking about it, and it seemed like we could bridge that gap and make something pleasurable, maybe make 3 salaries. So that's how, I mean, it wasn't we didn't make that jump right away. It was, I mean, wine is so interesting. You can't learn enough about it. You could study, the soil for the rest of your life, or the leaves, or French varietals, or Bordeaux varietals in that sense. So it just became such a big thing to think about and a pleasure thing. So it was just always fun for us.
Nice. How do you approach that limitlessness of the knowledge? I mean, how do you
stressed
where
out
do you is there any like attempt to hone in and just sort of have, like what's the corner that you're going to try to
We tried that with bottles. But in the early, like 5 years ago, we were like, hey, let's drink Beaujolais or something, or let's drink Bordeaux. We thought we could drink Bordeaux in a month or a year even. We're like, let's drink only Bordeaux this month. And you can't even, it's very laughable at this point.
We did get through a bit of Beaujolais.
If you're going to get through one, that one's a good one. And I still remember that. Like that was a great summer. When
I bet.
Yeah,
and then I think we tried to go to Bordeaux next, and it didn't work.
Oh god, slightly larger.
I think that's the first time I felt stressed out about wine. I was like, oh, it's much larger than.
It's like, and next we'll do Italy.
Exactly. All 1,500 or whatever varietals. Or
did you go to any of these places that you were tasting through, like Beaujolais?
So back to your first question about how we met, Garrett and I we both went to school in Italy, and we were roommates, and that's how we became friends. So we were in Italy. We didn't drink good wine in Italy. This was maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Poor college kids.
We were college kids, and we did not drink good wine. We drank a lot of wine, but it wasn't good wine. We went back. And we have since gone back to the exact school, and it was outside of Florence where we lived, and we went back with our wives and hung out a few years ago, and we were able to do some wine stuff then, and realized we had missed out on a lot, but it was a great year. I wouldn't, I guess, change a thing.
Yeah, and you can't really be too ambitious when you're like 19 years old and you can't even drink in your own home country. Like I didn't even know wine was like a thing. But our favorite wine experience there when we were at school, and then 10 years later when we went with our wives, is there's a pizza place called Pizzeria Spera that was between where we lived in Careggio and like in the center of town. And we called it Juicy Juice because it was, they called it Vino alla Spina. It was literally wine on tap. And it was like the most tanninless, juicy juice
pizza
wine you've ever had. And drinking it again was such a visceral experience. It was like a return. It was like we were shot 10 years into the past, and it was beautiful.
Nice. Well, so what are all the things that you're sort of dabbling with? So I mean, this is all very new for you guys still. And for example, this was your first harvest, I believe. Official, I mean, and with your commercial license.
Yeah.
And so everything's still in barrel or tank. But you have some other thing. You've planted some grapes as well. I mean, tell me a little bit about what you got going on in terms of the the harvest, the wines that you're doing, plans, projects, everything that's going on.
One
Did
of
you
the
say you were just bottling? By the way, did you say you were bottling a sparkling wine?
Yeah, sort of.
Kind of.
We're doing that right now.
This is
Unofficial.
it's a home
Okay.
project, but
Yeah.
we had we made an Alicante Boucher commercially this year, and came home with a bunch of must basically from Alicante Boucher, and it is a notoriously juicy grape. But we pressed it
Oh.
very, very lightly because we made a rosé out of it, and we wanted to impart very little skin color at all because the flesh had plenty, and we wanted it to be a very light color. So we came home with a bunch of very wet must, and we're like, what? I wonder how much we can get out of this. So we filled a 30-gallon French oak or American oak barrel that we had from previous years.
Yeah, we did a second press with a little basket press we have in the garage.
And this wasn't even like piquette style. You didn't even water it down.
No, not.
We did do a piquette.
We also
in the
made
garage.
a piquette out of Muscat.
What haven't you done?
But the one we just bottled, we literally pressed a nearly done ferment. It was probably like at 4 bricks when we finally decided to move it to barrel because we like to finish ferments in barrel. But we moved it to a keg and sealed the keg and let it carbonate itself. And that's what we bottled just now on a couple of swing tops, just to have something to drink on nights like this. And
Nice.
it's weird. It's certainly not spoiled or too odd, but yeah, it's weird.
Nice. Well.
Oh yeah.
Taylor was giving you the download.
So one of the things,
Yeah.
I mean, at least that I've been trying to work on, is we had a very frank discussion on the way back from our winery one night about where the simple problem of where we get grapes.
Yeah.
And so, we're really trying to focus on being a Southern California winery, and in order for us to do that, we have to have good grapes in Southern California. And our business model, at least for the short future, is not necessarily to establish our own vineyards, but to get grapes from growers who have a passion for growing grapes and are around here and are local. And so, we've been talking with the different wine alliances and trying to find folks who want to grow grapes around here.
Nice. Yeah. No, I know that you guys care about the farming. Are you having any luck finding people who are willing to do, organic, biodynamic style, regenerative?
Most of the people that we talk to, because we're very close to Yucaipa, and this year they submitted all of their paperwork for the Yucaipa Valley AVA, which, when approved, will be the newest AVA in California, and also, at least for a short period of time, in the U.S. And the AVA application and kind of bureaucratic steps are coming before the proliferation of vineyards. Whereas, as far as I know, it usually happens the other way around. Like, people in an area go, this soil, this climate is great for grapes. Let's plant them. Enough people do that, and then they go, hey, there's something special about this place. Let's sign the paperwork and make it official. But this way kind of happened the other way around. There was a couple of really passionate winemakers in the area who said, to bring attention and to protect this land for viticulture, let's file all the paperwork and then convince people to plant more grapes. So we've been having a lot of conversations with people who own property and are interested in wine and viticulture, but don't necessarily have the expertise. So they're very, very open to all sorts of different farming practices and are readily admit that they don't know what the right answer is, or aren't requiring these kind of ham-fisted conventional farming techniques, and they don't demand a certain tonnage per acre. They just really kind of want to do something special with a 3 to 5 acre parcel of land that they own that's adjacent to their home.
Yeah.
And we've got some friends in the area that have LLCs or who have a crew of guys that does landscaping but also does agricultural projects. And they invite us along to talk about varietals, talk about what we would do as a winery to purchase their fruit, or how we could work with them as, what is it called when you give people advice?
Consultant.
Consultants. Yeah, it's always the easy words. And so we've been having a lot of conversations with people, and they'll say, so what do we have to do to like interest you in our grapes as a long-term customer? And so we always come prepared by saying, well, we love Zinfandel, and we think that Zinfandel is California's grape, adopted grape, of course. But we're trying to get as many people as possible in as many places down here as possible to plant it, because we think that that is the benchmark. And then we'll say, so plant Zinfandel, and let's talk about farming organically or biodynamically. And they go, what's that? But it's never like a conversation ender, or they don't go, isn't that those people that follow like the cosmic cycles and the rotations of the moon? And they don't have that kind of background. So they're coming to it fresh, and they're excited about it. And they just go, okay, tell me what to do. And we don't know all the answers, but what's great about it is that they're open to it. So as consultants, we can find our own consultants and be a force for good in the Yucaipa Valley.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a great
Probably
idea.
we're a few years away from harvesting this stuff. So
right. Yeah, this is you're playing the long game.
The special places, but
yeah, and so
next year we'll be able to find some good fruit.
I mean, that is one of the drawbacks I've noticed for Southern California is like if it isn't just a vineyard that is like 80 years old that nobody's done anything to, and therefore it's organic or wild or feral by virtue of neglect, sort of. It's usually farmed conventionally. There's very few people who are, in the desert areas who are embracing sort of sustainable agriculture. But it does sound like that's changing, especially with people like you guys, pushing it.
Yeah, I think that we've worked with, we worked with a couple of people up in Lake Los Angeles. That's where we got the majority of our fruit this year. But we also worked with people who are farming wild vineyards, like the one you've described, and also like small time growers who have like half an acre of fruit. And I think those people who tend to be the most open to like, let's try something new. Let's try something more sustainable. And they get really excited about it. Like we introduced one of our growers to, indigenous yeast fermentations. Like that was such a novel idea to him, but he was really excited about it.
Yeah, it's funny. You guys planted a little hillside something, didn't you?
We have vines. A hillside thing, and the gophers are kicking our ass this year. We're realizing that actually really hard. So I think we will expand that. I want to get a control of gophers and figure out that management, and then we'll try to plant hopefully a proper acre up there. Right now it's 100 vines, and we're learning there, and it's Cinsault, which we're also excited about that varietal down here in Southern California.
Yeah.
So we would like to plant a proper acre of Cinsault. It would be a rough hillside, but I think it'd be a lot of fun. And I think it can make some really excellent fruit. I have to figure out how to not let the gophers just destroy all the beautiful vines.
You need to make friends with some California king snakes and coyotes. I think
all of those things are up there in
Florida.
I know. With owls that live there, but nothing. I mean, it's just infested with gophers.
Wow.
So if anyone has any ideas,
yeah,
we even have them. Every vine we planted, we put in. We buried it in a cage, like a chicken wire cage.
Oh yeah.
That didn't even do anything, and that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, I don't know. Planting like 1,200 vines in mesh, like baskets, sounds like a lot of work, and it didn't even work for my 100 vines. So farming is hard.
Really is. Lesson number 1. Let's talk about Lake Los Angeles and what you've made, what you're doing. Let's talk about all of that.
So there is a grape superstore in Lake Los Angeles. That's run by someone who's become a friend. And there are 13 different varietals grown over, it's probably 15 to 18 acres under vine. And it is really exciting because this year, the patriarch of the family passed early in the year, and the son of the family became responsible for kind of maintaining some of the contracts with the winemakers in the area who relied on that fruit. And 2019, of course, was like a huge glut of grapes that dropped the price of grapes all over the state. And grapes from the high desert, the Antelope Valley of the California high desert AVA, don't really command a huge price to begin with. And the pandemic shut down a lot of tasting rooms all over the state and world. So they were not getting a lot of orders. And this was a case of a vineyard basically becoming a no spray vineyard out of neglect because the family was just overwhelmed with all of those realities all at once. Now, of course, this is our first year. We're trying to get our arms around planting, maintaining, purchasing fruit, making wine, going through all the bureaucracy with the TTB and the ABC in the state of California. So it was important to us, but it has become increasingly important to us over the past, year and a half, that it be, farmed in a sustainable way. And it just happened to kind of be that way this year. It hasn't been in the past, in full transparency. But when you go into this vineyard, there's something really special happening with the son of the family who never wanted to be a part of this, but he was kind of brought into it under duress, and then kind of caught the bug midway through the season, especially when we talked to him about like what was possible out of that vineyard, what we were interested in. We went in with all these preconceived notions about what we wanted to make, but then at the end of the year, we ended up making things that were very different. Some things that were pretty close to what we had in mind to begin with, but the growing season was, despite all the fires and the insanity of 2020, ended up being pretty predictable and consistent. And actually things started to ripen too consistently and all at the same time, which overwhelmed us and our very small crew of friends and family who were helping us harvest. But we were fortunate enough to be able to harvest everything ourselves with friends and family. Essentially when we wanted to. We called the pick dates on most of our picks and ended up making, out of that one vineyard, we ended up making, 5 programs?
5 programs. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 programs, and then 2 that were from 2 different counties.
Yeah. 8.
Wow.
8 barrels.
Yeah, 8 barrels total. So obviously very small first commercial year, but 5 from one winery, or from one vineyard, sorry. Just because we were so, like, it was a superstore. We were just walking down the aisles and being like, oh, let's get some of that. Let's get some of that.
Yeah, it's something that could never happen again. Like being able to be that hands-on and choose what fruit you want, like up to the minute, where it's like, oh, I'm going to throw in an extra, ton of this. It was really special. And we know that that's not something that can always happen, but it was a fun year with that vineyard. So Lake Los Angeles is a special place.
Yeah, and to paint the picture, it's really in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I think there are more like wildlife habitat preserves out there than there are people and houses. But something that when I started looking into that vineyard a little bit, it called to my attention some geography. If you look at an aerial satellite image of that part of the Antelope Valley, there is this big alluvial fan, a sedimentary deposit that fans out over the desert. And that vineyard is not like in the thick of that. It's sort of out at the edge of the fan where that fan dissipates into the desert at one corner. But that fan is really fascinating to me because it's this dark blue gray in the middle of this light sandy desert. And so I looked into it, and it's called the Sheep's Canyon Alluvial Fan because it comes out of Sheep's Canyon, off this mountain in the San Gabriels, and I can't remember the name of it. But if you look at the crest of the mountain, you can see where all of this color comes from. It's like this blue marl limestone that is like very similar to, some other very famous wine growing regions. And it's, I don't know, it's fascinating to me. I actually like started calling around to local governmental agencies in around that area, and I got a fire department person, and I was like, this guy, he was a fireman. I was like, hey, I'm trying to find out like if anybody knows about the the soil where you guys live. And he was like, what? And I was like, no, it's like there's a weird color difference and you can see it from satellites. He's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So it's like, he was like, because the fire department, that's kind of what I called him, was like right on the dividing line. He was like, oh yeah, you can see it in the soil. You can see like one side it's this color and one side it's this color. I was like, ah, man. But he had no clue. I have no idea. But that's how obsessed I got about it. But there's something kind of special and interesting. I agree about that vineyard, and you can, the grapes as well. I mean, it's strange. I wanna get into more of how you guys feel about the this, what's the word, the reputation that the desert wines in Southern California have in terms of grapes and wines. And let's just talk about those chips on your shoulders, and let's
that's
break out the couch.
something we are up against. But I mean, I think people just use the sun to their advantage, and that's how it's been in California for a long time. Even in Napa and I guess Robert Mondavi, even, it's just, we have sun in California, so let's take advantage of that. Let's ripen these grapes as much as we possibly can, and that's been to some a downfall to California wine.
Right.
And in Southern California, there's more sun than in anywhere else, and it definitely is hot. But there are pockets where the heat goes away as soon as the sun goes down. So you have those diurnal shifts, and in Southern California, we definitely have that just as much as anywhere else. We're what, 60 to 80 miles from the coast, so some nights you do get coastal breeze. We don't necessarily get summer fogs, but it gets cool, and there's no reason down here you can't get, if you pick right, grow the right stuff. That's another big thing, is growing the right stuff down here. You can pick right, farm right. We think wines can be just as delicate in hot climates as cooler climates, or not even cooler climates, but climates that grow wine in California that are hot, and they're known for their great wine. It's not hotter down here than some places. So,
well, and you're talking about a couple different areas. So I imagine like the Redlands area, you guys kind of get the funneled sea breeze at the back of the Los Angeles basin, right?
like 12 down here, it's like 1,000 to, I don't know, 15 or 18, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 in this area. So it's a little bit higher elevation. So that helps with the diurnal shifts.
Okay. And up in the Antelope Valley, so that's, I mean, like that vineyard is at like 2,600 feet, or Lake Los Angeles is around 2,600 feet. And then it kind of, the closer you get to the San Gabriels, you start rising. What is that? I mean, you refer to that evening breeze as the Mistral, like a Mistral. Does it have a name, that sort of desert breeze that cruises in?
So it depends on the time of year. I mean, in the desert, it's just called the wind. I mean, because it's constant. It never ends. I mean, Taylor and I we wouldn't even say the word wind out loud when we were kids, because we didn't want it to start blowing. Like, if there was a moment of stillness and someone said, "Hey, where'd the wind go?"
then it would start.
Yeah, but of course, there is the Santa Ana winds, which
it's a little bit. Yeah, Santa Ana winds don't really help anything.
What's the Joan Didion quote? It's something like the Santa Anas have housewives fingering the edges of blades and eyeing the necks of their husbands. That's a real thing. Slouching towards Bethlehem. But that's a wind that is a special to this area, because it's a wind that blows from the desert down the passes.
Right. I was going to say it's like the reverse. It's like everything. It's like the upside down of winds.
Right. I guess if you think about it that way, that's the one time of year where the rest of inland Southern California experiences the wind of the desert.
Yeah.
Maybe
Which
people are
is
just always a little more insane up in the desert. It's not just during that time of year.
yeah, no, we feel it out here. It's definitely, we wish it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
But the in terms of like the Mistral, I just, you know, we've talked about this before, but there are certain things that just aren't realities up in the desert, like certain disease pressures, because
yeah.
you just never reach a certain amount of humidity, which is necessary for things like powdery to begin. You
R-
certainly reach temperatures that allow for that kind of growth, but you never get that kind of humidity.
Right, and oftentimes the daytime temperatures quickly get to over the sort of range that would be happy for mildews too. So it's, you're actually sort of searing them as well as desiccating them.
Right, right. Well, and I mean, Dusty and I both just finished I guess we're a little behind the curve on this, but we just finished the New California Wine, the John Bonnet book, and he talks about visiting. I hope I'm not getting the book wrong. I read too many books at one time, but he visits some farmers out in the valley, the San Joaquin Valley, and they're growing these massive, massive vineyards of, I don't know, like
French Colombard.
Yeah, French Colombard.
Yeah, Thompson seedless or
Madeira.
whatever. Yeah.
Madeira, yeah.
And they're just putting out like something insane.
20, I think.
Yeah, 20 tons an acre, just something crazy. And he's just
Yeah.
like, oh, just put water in the soil.
Yeah.
Put fertilizer in the soil, or not. Just keep watering them, and they'll keep putting out. He doesn't care about quality. He doesn't care about anything but quantity and the look of the grapes. But that's not to say that the people that we get grapes from in the desert think the same thing. They're interested in quality, and they really care about their vines. But it's just it defies a certain kind of logic to go into the middle of what otherwise looks like a wasteland to the uninitiated. And then come across 20 acres of beautiful 23-year-old vines that are just, as happy as can be.
And those vines also are native. They're native yeast population. You wouldn't think. We even thought, like, are these going to even kick off spontaneously? But they really did, just as fast as anything else. There's no oak trees around. There's just sagebrush and some yucca trees, yucca bushes.
It goes back to,
and it really, there's still a population. So the soil, there's good soil up there. There's yeast population. It's just as much as anything else. It's just a little bit harder to visualize it and harder to see everything. But it's definitely there.
Back to your point of the perception that desert grapes are inferior. It's kind of in line with the perception of the desert in general, and that's people think of the desert as a dead place when it's absolutely not a dead place.
Well, it seems like, so is there any legitimacy to criticisms of, getting the more like raisin flavors, or not having enough hang time to develop, complexity without baking it?
Yeah. So there's Mark Matthews. He was a professor emeritus at UC Davis. He wrote a book called Terroir and Other Myths of Wine Growing. It really, have you read that?
I have seen that. I've seen a lot of articles written about it, but I haven't read it.
And in Jordan Mackey and Raj Parr's second book, The Sommelier's Atlas of Taste, they referred to it. They kind of responded to it, because one of his major claims is, terroir doesn't exist. The idea of minerality is absurd, because there's no mineral content in wine. So how could you actually taste minerals? And he takes things very literally and scientifically, which, for guys like Raj Parr and Jordan Mackey, misses the point.
Yeah.
Just because you can't explain it scientifically doesn't mean that you can't perceive of it, sensationally. But I think that another point that Mark Matthews made in that book is that the concept of phenolic ripeness is absurd. It's just something that the wine trade just kind of tosses around like any kind of terminology that comes in vogue. Like, oh, well, you got to make sure that those seeds taste like almonds when you bite into them, or else you're really not going to get grapes that are worth anything at all. It's just kind of this folk wisdom that becomes shrouded in this kind of scientific sheep's clothing and becomes assumed wisdom. And he makes a lot of claims that, while scientific, might not necessarily hold water for the wine community at large. But ultimately, his claim is that with wine, just like with anything else, you should have a healthy level of skepticism. So when someone says, this is the way that wine is grown, these are the places that wine is grown, be skeptical. Like, don't just let them make those claims, because it's not just a matter of making one experiment with a bunch of variables controlled for without the proper context. That's not sufficient to prove something is true. It's more experiential. It's more phenomenological than that. Wine is something to be experienced, and you have to experience it over and over again. And to say that this is the only way that wine can be made and this is the only place it can be made is too simplistic.
Yeah, and a little snobby, and a little well, it benefits the people saying it are the people who live in those places, so it benefits
Right.
them. What have you discovered this year? I mean, are you guys doing measurements when you're picking or crushing? Like, do you know what your acids and sugars are to see? I mean, let's start by saying you guys probably picked about a month earlier than the rest of California. Is that correct?
If not earlier.
Yeah, we had a very early pick this year.
Wow.
Our fruit, the desert fruit came quickly, and the vineyard that we harvested from here in Redlands actually was first.
We had a huge, we picked that one at least 2 weeks before we originally thought.
Yeah.
But we had a big heat. We had an amazing summer in Southern California, and then out of nowhere, we had projected 113 degree, like a whole week of
It's hot.
plus 110.
Yeah, in August.
Yeah, so we decided to pick that fruit, and we're getting a lot of bird damage on that vineyard. So we decided to pick right before that crazy week, and we were a little bit. We were tasting it. Everything seemed fine. We were happy with it. We were just doing some bricks readings, and those were coming in maybe a little bit lower than we originally thought. What, 24?
Some of them were 24. So we did a measurement to the vineyard down here that's like actually in town here, which is a very small parcel planted on probably a 30% grade in the foothills, owned by this really sweet guy who, built the trellises himself, planted himself. He just learned it soup to nuts. And when we measured at 22 and it was up from 21 the day before, we were like, this is accumulating sugar really fast. And we were looking at like what the birds were doing, and it's a Primitivo,
nice.
It's Zinfandel. We want to call it Zinfandel, but we can do that. And we were like, okay, we better pick this. If it's a little early, then that's better than losing more of the fruit.
And we were excited about it a little bit early. We weren't against that at all. So,
but just to give you an idea of what the fruit looked like this year, we picked mid-August, and our bricks were 23 and a half.
The Zinfandel?
The Primitivo. Yeah, the Primitivo. The pH was 3.1.
Wow.
And the TA was
3.1.
3.1. Yeah, it was insane. It was
so that's plenty of acid. I mean, that's counterintuitive. Like in hot. I mean, my I'm sure the stereotype is in our climate, we lose acid really quickly. We accumulate sugar and just drop acid. But that's a pretty nice balance. I mean, you could even let that hang a little bit.
It's a great wine. We could have let it hang, but like Dustin,
when you have that week coming.
Yeah.
I made a couple decisions based on that week too. Yeah,
That was crazy. We were doing so good. It was such an amazing summer. And
But
then
we don't regret it. It's a great wine. It's
that one tastes. I think it'll be the best tasting wine. Maybe not the most interesting, but that one is quality is there. That's an incredible vineyard.
Yeah,
nice.
We're hoping we'll have access to it next year. But the thing is, like, it's so small that we'll never get more than a barrel out of it. But it does bode well for the rest of vineyards around here and in Yucaipa, maybe even at higher elevations too, because there's some parts of Yucaipa that are 3,000, 3,200 feet. So they have diurnal shifts of like 40 degrees in the summer sometimes.
I noticed something. So here, as we know, we're always learning, but so and I think you and I reacted, I mean, you plural and me reacted similarly, probably with a little bit of trepidation about that huge heat spike that we were going to get, and did some early picks because of that. I discovered, and I don't know if you guys found this, but I went back and did later picks as well because I just had to, like, things happened and I wanted more grapes. Picked from the same block. The sugars had gone up and the acid hadn't changed at all. Like, I mean, if it had gone up, it had gone up only slightly. And this is like a week and a half, 2 weeks later. Even after that heat spike, it was almost like when it's that hot, the vines just took a break. And they're like, nah, we're not doing anything. We're just shutting down. Nothing to do here.
They stop ripening, but I feel like 110. That's a scary. I feel like vines will catch on fire at 110. It's a crazy. When you see a forecast, when you see a 5-day forecast with that, it's scary. But you do hear that things will stop ripening, and you just kind of wait for it. So
right.
Just got spooked. It's interesting to think of what it would taste like if we hadn't. And we like you, we picked fruit after that, and everything was fine. They didn't catch on fire, and the skin didn't melt. So I think they can definitely weather stuff like that. It's just terrifying.
Yeah, and I think,
oh my God, yeah.
It's like varietal is important too. Like we were talking to the guys at Galliano and Filippi in the Cucamonga Valley, and one guy in particular, Filippi, was like, "Yeah, there was one year where we lost all the fruit on all the vines. It literally just like essentially melted off the vine. But the Petite Syrah was the exception, and the Zinfandel. So like varietals that are just like,
they're made for it.
Come at me.
Yeah, that's cool. So what did you guys make this year?
That's a great question, because
a long list.
We made more than we thought we would going into it. It was hard to say no.
Yeah, so let's
oh, believe me, man.
Oh, the first pick was the Muscat, right?
Yeah, so we also said during the season, like, we were going to champion certain programs because we had so many of them. We were just going to say, okay, there's 3 of us. What are we most excited about? And where is each of us going to, like, spend most of our time thinking about that program? So Dusty's was first.
Yeah, so where we call home is like our AP. They were having some problems with some flood damage from a neighboring tenant. So we actually had to pick a week later on the Muscat than we wanted to. So of course we're all stressing out. I'm stressing out. I'm thinking it's just going to get nuked. And it got a little bit riper than we would have chose by, like, textbook. Like what we wanted, it was a little bit different. So we picked the Muscat and we split that. So we did a skin contact for 7 days. 7 days, right?
Yeah.
And then we did a direct press on that. So we had a juice Muscat that we're calling, and then a skin Muscat. So those are 2 programs. Next we picked, was it the Zinfandel?
Yeah, the Zinfandel was the next day.
Zinfandel was the Redlands. This one, the one that came from this small vineyard, and we picked the whole vineyard. And we ended up with those pretty insane numbers. And then we had intended to do a Spanish style, a Tempranillo Grenache blend. But when we got to the vineyard, they weren't anywhere close to ready. And so this was where we talked earlier about being able to walk down the aisles at the department store. We kind of had to do a quick pivot, and we ended up making a Viognier Petit Verdot sorry,
This is what happens when you have 7 programs in a year.
Petit Verdot Viognier 70-30 blend. So 70 Petit Verdot, 30 Viognier. And we thought this is going to be an experiment, but it turned out to be a fascinating wine. It just floral, like candied violets is what we, when it was young, we tasted it. It had been in the barrel for maybe a couple of weeks, and we tasted it. And when you put it in your mouth, you've got Petit Verdot in your face. And then all of a sudden, it just did a cartwheel and turned into Viognier in your mouth. And it was just like this experience. Like one sip was Petit Verdot for 5 seconds, and then Viognier for the next 5. So we're excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, and
I love that idea. I'm a big Northern Rhone fan, and I think throwing in some Petit Verdot sounds kind of exciting.
Yeah, and 70-30, like I'd like to say that it was some like very calculated number, but ultimately it just came down to the pick. We were out there, we had so many hands, we had access to so many rows, and we knew that we wanted, like, the Petit Verdot suffered a lot of frost damage, or was it frost damage? Frost and wind. Yeah. Anyway, they were not happy this year. They were not putting out a lot of fruit. Like, you could walk 3 or 4 vines without a single cluster, but the next one maybe had 5 or 10. But the clusters were, very small berries, tight clusters, so tight that they were hard to actually shear off of the vine.
Wow, like
but the fruit, you pop it in your mouth, and it's just like, it was different than anything else at the vineyard that we had tasted. And we tasted every varietal of the 13.
And what they told us basically was that we thought we were getting the second growth fruit. The first growth had died and frozen off, and then you normally go down the vines when you're harvesting, you've got the green ones on there. We were harvesting the green ones that had ripened in the meantime, so it was kind of cool.
But we had run all the numbers on every varietal, just trying to figure out where they would be when we wanted to pick, because we knew that we had that kind of flexibility. But my program was kind of the long game at the end of the season, because I wanted to make what we're calling a Rosé of Alicante Bouschet, but was ultimately made as a Vin Gris, or a Blanc de Blanc. And we essentially direct pressed it. We did crush and destem it just to like make some of the juice more available, and then like 10 minutes later put it in the press and pressed it very, very gently for about 2 hours. And then of course we came home with the must that produced another 40 gallons. So out of full ton, that'll tell you how much we actually got out of it. But I wanted something that was, you've made a barrel-aged rosé.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of those before and really loved them. Like a rosé with some body, like a fat rosé.
Yeah.
That still had some acid, that was still refreshing, but also had that kind of beauty and complexity that oxidation brings.
Yeah.
And so, and we also thought it was kind of cool because there's only like 1 or 2 Alicante Bouschet rosés that we know of. One of them is from Australia, and the other one is from Gary Kramer Guitar Cellars in Paso Robles. And we bought it, and we thought it was fun and refreshing. But this one, like, over time, it kind of came out a little darker than I wanted to see it. I wanted it to be the kind of this very elegant kind of onion skin, but it didn't. It came out a little pinker. But over time, as it's been oxidizing, it has gotten paler and paler and paler. And now it's this gorgeous, like somewhere between pink and orange color that's just like, it's better than if we could have picked it off a color wheel. It's totally accidental.
And that one's so much fun for us to see because it's obviously, little to no skin contact. So it's all what the flesh color is over time. Yeah. And that's really cool to see.
Yeah, and then later, after we had started this, we bought a couple of bottles of Abe Schooner's Rhododactylus from the Bechtold Vineyard in Lodi, which is all Cinsault. But he made a Vin Gris out of that Cinsault, and it's really, really interesting, and we love it. And since then, we've bought many, many bottles. But we were just like, okay, this is how the wine is going to turn out in any capacity. Like, it's definitely not Lodi. It's definitely not that Bechtel vineyard that's 130 years old. But if it is in that kind of realm, it's going to be a very lovely wine.
Nice.
So I guess that's 2 Muscats that Dusty oversaw. The Zinfandel and the Petit Verdot Viognier that was kind of Taylor's baby. And then the Alicante Boucher that was mine. And then we had, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Or other than the field blend,
We had the field blend, which was our Los Empleados.
Yeah, that was an honor to the at the vineyard in Lake Los Angeles. The owner, he had passed away that year, and so this was a tribute to him. He used to call his vines his employees. So our this wine was a field blend, and we named it Los Empleados, the employees. And yeah, that one helped me with all the varietals. There was Muscat,
Zinfandel,
Alicante Boucher,
Chardonnay.
and Alicante Boucher was his favorite, so we had to have that one.
Even though it was a bit early in the year, I think that came in at like 18.
Yeah, it's a little early, but that probably we also threw in some Chardonnay that was way overripe. So
we had Syrah in there,
Petit Verdot,
and
Viognier. So it was like 3 and 3 white, 3 red, and right now it's showing this beautiful, like straight up purple color.
Nice.
And the pH is sky high on that wine, just absolutely astronomical.
Like 4 something or what?
I think it's 4-1. It's 4-1.
Hey, come on, that's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's fine. It tastes good.
Yeah. We've been watching it very, very closely, and
Yeah, I was gonna say, just drink it fast.
Garrett mentioned earlier the juicy juice wine in Italy.
Yeah, it's a drinker.
Yeah.
Don't sit on it too long.
Don't think
it's
about
a drinker.
We've played with the idea of putting it in liter bottles with crown caps.
I was gonna say, large format only.
Right.
That's right.
It's good though, so who cares? Wine's supposed to be drunk, it's supposed to be good, and it's good. So who cares?
I'm really experimenting with pH. I mean, it's been an interesting thing now that I'm, as a home winemaker for years, I just was sort of guessing at pHs and really didn't know it all. I mean, I wasn't even guessing. It was not even, I just didn't want to spend the money on a good pH meter. I tried a couple times, but if you get a cheap one, it's pointless basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found, I'm surprised how high the pH is when it's still, and it still feels, so many other factors affect that sensation of acidity, I guess is what I've learned.
Yes.
You can't do it with white or rosé. Like once you get over a certain point, those are, and that's a fine line. Like you can get over like 3.3 and it tastes flabby. But with red, you can be up there, and it's like the tannins come into play and everything else that's going on, and it can still feel really fresh and not at all, flabby. It can taste just lovely.
Yeah, and this might be a bridge too far, but we were even talking about Jamie Good wrote a really cool book, Flawless, and it's a popular press book, I think. Maybe it's University of California, but whatever the case. He talks about all the different flaws in wine, or like what we would call a flaw. And sorry for all the noise. We just got a chilled bottle, flip top bottle of the.
It's beyond chilled.
Frozen.
What comes after chilled?
Frozen Alicante Boucher, sparkling Alicante Boucher.
No, it's good. It's okay though.
Is it too cold?
The smell is a little off.
I can't even smell it.
Yeah. Anyway, so he wrote this book, Flawless, and like there's obviously a whole chapter about volatile acidity, acetic acid, and we've been thinking a lot about that because acetic acid in its own right, like some people go, oh, now if I can sense any kind of volatile acidity in this wine, it's flawed. It's not worth drinking. It's shot, because we don't drink vinegar. We put vinegar on salads. But there's some people that are like, yeah, it, and the word that everyone uses is like, it makes a wine lifted. It lifts the wine. Like, we get used to only a certain kind of acidity, providing structure to a wine, but a volatile acidity could kind of serve the same purpose in some way. So it requires people to definitely change their definition of what acid, quote unquote, acid in wine is and what purpose it serves. But I mean, if we're thinking about the changing nature of wine, especially thinking about the influence that natural wine has had on, wine at large, VA could play that role, especially with high pH wines where VA is much more likely to occur.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely seen some VA that has been in some very expensive wines intentionally. So it's, I've definitely, I mean, it's a stylistic thing at certain points.
There was one final program.
Oh, yeah.
The one we are all, I would say, most excited about.
Yeah. Who wants to talk about that?
So you interviewed Abe Schooner, correct?
Oh, yes. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So he oversees some amazing vineyards, and he last year got access to a very cool vineyard that was planted somewhere, let's call it 1910, 1920, pre-prohibition vineyard down in Temecula on a Indian reservation. And he got access to it. We helped him train some of the vines. It was completely wild. No one had touched it. No one had made wine from it for, I don't know, since Prohibition, and no one had irrigated it. And it was proper wild. And the first year, it didn't really have barely any fruit. It's about 2 acres. And during the winter, this last year, we helped him prune a bit. He had a cool crew with him. We met some great people, and this year, tons of fruit came off of it. It's mostly Mission, they're calling it, some Grenache probably, and just this beautiful, weird fruit. And we were able to get our hands on a ton of it. He was nice enough to let us come in and pick our own fruit after he had gotten what he wanted, and making some really cool, let's call it Mission fruit.
Yeah, really thick skins, lots of tannins. So interesting because of their bush vines. They're just wild, and the clusters are growing a lot of the time on the ground. You look at a bush and you don't see much, but you pick up a vine and all of a sudden here's these clusters growing on the ground, but there's no rot. They have a little bit of dirt on them, but you pick them up and shake them out, and they're healthy. So it's just fascinating to get to work a feral vineyard like that, and then to make the wine from it.
And another cool thing about that is it's re-rooted itself probably at least a dozen times, and every time it roots itself, the DNA changes. And so if it started life as Mission, now it's its own thing, and there's nothing like it, and that's really special. So we can call it Mission fruit, but at the same time,
when you say re-rooted, you mean when the canes come down and lay on the ground and put out
the ground for long enough, they will root, and then it creates something else.
Really? I'm surprised by that. Are you sure about that?
It's probably
We wouldn't believe it either, but we saw with our own eyes. Like Abe would walk over, like just hanging out.
No. I believe that would happen because I mean I've started vines from just sticking canes into the dirt, But I mean, that it changes DNA and becomes something else. I know that happens from seed, but I would be shocked that it happens when a cane roots.
So like, there's both things happening. So there's so many different things happening in these bushes, and has been happening over the last 60 years.
This is a podcast in itself. That vineyard,
yeah. And you've talked to him about it before on this very podcast. But listen to the Organic Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcast. But he would like lift up some canes and go like, look at this. And we would look at it and be like, look, this, vine is, rooting again, where it's touched the surface of the ground. Look at this. And we'd look and be like, this is a vine that looks as if it's grown from the seeds that have planted in the ground under the canopy that's grown over them. So there's
Right.
so many different things going on. And you
Yeah.
look from cluster to cluster, and there's no resemblance. You know, some are
Right.
big, shaggy, loose clusters. Some of them are these like really plump, like clusters. They must weigh like 10 pounds. You know, just massive, massive clusters.
Half of them are haven't turned red. They're just they're ripe.
Yeah,
but they are green.
And you're like, oh, I'm going to not pick this. And then you taste it. And then you're like, oh, this is absolutely a ripe bunch.
On the same cluster, you've got this dark red grape next to this green grape, and they're both ripe.
They're both ripe.
Yeah.
That's
and,
amazing.
You think like, oh, this is all the same vine. But like, really, if you take a closer look, there's so many things coming straight out of the soil that are not attached to one another, that are somehow related genetically, but you're not really sure how much. And, you know, like really diving into it and separating them all out and being like, well, this comes from that, would kind of take away from the magic of just like going through. And you look at the bin after we got done, or the bins after we got done picking, and there's gray, there's black, there's red, there's white. There's just, it looks like one of our co-ferments, but it all came from the same vineyard.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I mean, I was fortunate, I will admit, to get a barrel taste of that, and unbelievable. Like, it tasted like candy.
2020 barrel taste?
Yeah, from us.
Oh, from ours. I thought you got some of Abe's. I was going to grill you on how that tasted because I'm so curious.
Yeah.
No.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yours. I mean, I'm digging deep through many other tastings since then, but it was memorable. I mean, it stuck out as being, I mean, for something so gnarly and so wild, it just had like these candy watermelon almost flavors and aromas. Like, is it still doing that?
Yeah, and then there's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I have gotten from the beginning these kind of dried leaf and like green tea notes.
There's definitely some tea that really excites us.
There's a dust.
Okay.
And when you pull the clusters out, there's grass growing in the clusters. There's leaves in the clusters. They're dirty clusters.
So you might literally be tasting dried leaves and not
dried. But we feel like we can taste that.
Who says there's no terroir?
Like we can truly taste that vineyard. And I don't know if it's just us or if no one else will taste. We can taste dust, dirt in it. I don't know if it's just us, but I think it's there.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if you do this, Adam, but we definitely just throw a handful of dirt into all of our ferments.
Yeah.
That terroir.
It's funny. I had some Grenache that I was foot treading, and I was like, this is filthy. Like, I don't know what I just had a sense that they spilled the bin at some point in the vineyard accidentally and had to scoop it all up and put it back in the bin. It was just covered, like they had intention. Like, I don't know how it got that dirty unless they accidentally spilled them. Honestly, it might have been not the whole bin, but like a couple picking bins or something like that. But I was like, all right, well, let's see how this goes. I mean, it's nice, clean dirt.
Yeah, the stuff that came out, our first, the wine that we did harvest to bottle was our Ukaipa Valley Zinfandel, and when we took it out of there, it was mud in the bottom of the fermenter.
Yeah, it wasn't just leaves; it was straight up mud.
Yeah, this weird clay, this beautiful clay we could have made of.
We'll make our amphora for our next vintage.
Yeah. This is the other reason you let things age and settle.
Yeah.
Get off the dirt. Well, cool, guys. How can people find out more and get in touch with you if you so desire?
Yeah,
we try to take our Instagram seriously. So Herrmann York Wine at Herrmann York Wine is our Instagram, and HermannYork.wine is the website.
and it's HERRMANN.
Thank you. Yeah,
York.
I make things complicated. So just Herrmann with lots of extra letters.
And you can get there at either herrmannyork.wine or herrmannyorkwine.com. So,
or herrmannwine.com
/York.
That one doesn't work. Don't try that one.
Don't try that one.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much. I mean, we could continue talking for hours, but it's been over an hour already, and I don't want to make this something that people won't listen to, because I think you have some really important stuff to say about what's going on down here. So thank you so much.
Yes, and thanks for being another Southern California winemaker.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Southern California wine.
If you value this podcast and would like to support it, just go to centraliswine.com and buy a bottle or 3 of our wines. Centralis is my winery, and I started it to promote regenerative organic agriculture because I believe it is one of the most powerful solutions to some of the most important problems we're facing in human and environmental health today. The website again is centraliswine.com. That's CENTRALAS wine.com. Also, our Instagram is at centraliswine, and you can email me with questions, requests, and feedback at adam@centraliswine.com. Thanks for listening.